I didn't believe in time glitches. Not really. I mean, yeah, I'd heard the stories. We all have. Deja vu, missing time, clocks acting weird. But there's always an explanation, right? Stress, memory errors, coincidence. That's what I told myself. Until I found the case from 1977. A soldier, routine patrol, Chilean mountains. Nothing unusual. Then he sees it. A mist, not fog. Something glowing, soft, silent, almost alive. And for a second, he hesitates. Would you walk into something like that? He did. He takes a step forward and disappears. His unit panics. They search. They call his name. Nothing. Then, 15 minutes later, he walks back out, confused, disoriented, swears he just stepped in and out. But his face, 5 days of stubble. 5 days in 15 minutes. Now stop. Think about that. Either he's lying or time didn't move the same way for him. And that's where this gets uncomfortable, because he's not the only one, not even close. I went deeper, and I found a pilot, experienced, calm, not the type to imagine things. Flying over the Bermuda Triangle, clear mission, straight path. Then the instruments start acting weird, static, compass spinning, and ahead of him, a fog, bright, almost glowing. Sound familiar? He flies through it. Because what else can he do? Turn back? Not an option. So he pushes forward. And when he comes out the other side, everything is normal again. Calm skies, working instruments. But something's off. He checks the clock. He's flown 250 miles in 34 minutes. That's impossible. Not with that aircraft. Not with any aircraft at the time. So what happened? Did he go faster? Or did time slow down? Or speed up? Or brake? And that's when I started noticing a pattern. Same details. Over and over. A strange silence. Like the world gets muted. A tingling sensation. Like static on your skin. And that mist. Always the mist. Glowing. Watching. Waiting. At this point, I was already uncomfortable. But then I found the story that really messed with me. An RAF commander. Flying a biplane. Normal flight. Until he looks down and sees an airfield. But not just any airfield. This one looks new, fresh, active, people moving, planes on the ground, everything alive. Then just like that, it's gone. Back to empty land. No structures, no movement, nothing. Here's the part that gets you. For years later, that exact airfield is built in the same spot, exactly how he saw it. So what did he see? The future? Or was he there? And if that's possible, what does that say about time? Because we're taught something simple. Time moves forward, one direction, like a line. Past, present, future, clean, logical, safe. But what if that's wrong? What if time isn't a line? What if it's something else? Something unstable. Something that can bend, or tear, or overlap. That's when I found Jenny Randles, a British researcher. She spent decades collecting these cases, hundreds of them, different countries, different people, no connection, same experience. And she noticed something no one else did. All of them share the same symptoms: silence, tingling, glowing mist, and broken time. She called them time storms. And at first I laughed. I'll be honest, time storms sound like science fiction, like something from a movie. But then I kept reading, and the more I read, the less funny it felt, because she wasn't guessing. She was connecting patterns, patterns that shouldn't exist, across decades, across continents, across people who never met. And her conclusion? This is where it gets weird. She believes UFO sightings, ghost encounters, and alien abductions aren't separate phenomena. They're the same thing, different expressions of one underlying event, a disturbance in time itself. And suddenly, all those stories don't feel so separate anymore. They feel connected, like pieces of something bigger, something we don't fully understand, something we've been misinterpreting. And here's the part that really got me. She says these time storms aren't random. They happen in specific locations. Hotspots, Bermuda Triangle, remote mountains, isolated areas, places where something isn't stable. And I couldn't stop thinking about that word, unstable, because if time itself can become unstable, then nothing is fixed, not the past, not the present, not even you. And that's when the question hit me. What if we've already been through one? What if you've stepped into one and just don't remember? And the only reason you think everything is normal is because time corrected itself? Or maybe it didn't. I tried to explain it away. Seriously, I told myself there had to be a rational answer. Optical illusions, faulty instruments, human error, because if time itself can break, then everything we rely on falls apart. Physics, cause and effect, reality. So I went looking for science, not theories, not stories, actual physics. And at first it helped. Einstein already proved time isn't constant. It stretches. It bends. The faster you move, the slower time goes. The stronger the gravity, the more time distorts. We know this. It's real. GPS satellites literally adjust for it. Otherwise, your phone wouldn't even work. So, okay, time isn't as stable as we thought. But that's small, controlled, predictable. Milliseconds. Not days and 15 minutes. Not entire locations slipping through time. So where's the gap? Where does real science end? And this begin? That's when I found something I wasn't expecting. Spacetime isn't smooth. Not perfectly. On a quantum level. It's chaotic. Fluctuating. Like a stormy ocean. Tiny disturbances. Constant motion. Now imagine that for a second. If spacetime is already unstable at the smallest level, what happens when something amplifies it? What happens when those fluctuations grow, scale up, become visible, noticeable, dangerous? That's when the idea hit me. What if time storms are just large-scale disturbances in something that's already unstable, like waves in an ocean? Most are small, but sometimes you get a rogue wave, massive, unpredictable, impossible to ignore. And if you're caught in it, you don't control where you go. Or when. That's when all those cases started lining up. The mist, the silence, the tingling. What if those aren't random details? What if they're symptoms? Signs that reality itself is shifting? And suddenly, that glowing fog doesn't feel mystical. It feels like a boundary, a transition point between one time state and another. Now here's where things get really uncomfortable. Because if that's true, then time isn't something we move through. It's something we're inside of, like water. And sometimes that water moves without warning and carries you with it. I sat there for a while after realizing that, just thinking, because it changes everything. It means the past isn't locked. The future isn't unreachable. They're just different locations. And sometimes the walls between them get thin, too thin. But then I had a problem. If this happens, why isn't it everywhere? Why don't we see it constantly? Why isn't the world full of people slipping through time every day? And that's where location comes back in. Patterns, hotspots, places where these events cluster. The Bermuda Triangle, certain mountain ranges, specific remote regions. And I started asking myself, what's different about these places? Magnetic fields? Geology? Energy? Turns out, all of the above. Some of these locations have unusual magnetic activity, fluctuations, anomalies, areas where instruments don't behave normally. And if magnetic fields can influence space-time, even slightly, then maybe, just maybe, these places act like weak points, thin spots, where reality is easier to disturb. And that's when the idea gets even darker, because if there are weak points, then they could be triggered, not just naturally, but artificially. Now I know how that sounds, but stay with me. There have been experiments, real ones, looking into time, gravity, electromagnetic fields. Nothing proven to break time, but enough to show we don't fully understand it. And that's always where things get dangerous. Right at the edge of understanding. That's where mistakes happen. Or discoveries. Or both. And for a second, I actually laughed again. Because the idea of someone creating a time storm, that sounds insane. Like a sci-fi movie plot. Secret labs. Hidden experiments. Reality tearing apart. Yeah, okay, sure. But then I remembered something. We split the atom before we fully understood radiation. We created nuclear weapons before we understood the long-term consequences. We pushed boundaries first and deal with the fallout later. So is it really that crazy? Or is it just early? And that's when the bigger implication hit me. If time can be disturbed, if it can ripple, then what else can it do? Can it overlap? Can two moments exist in the same place? Is that what people see when they report ghosts? Not spirits, but echoes? Fragments of another time bleeding through? And UFOs? What if they're not from somewhere else, but someone else? And for a second, everything connected. Too perfectly. Too neatly. Which is always a red flag. Because reality isn't supposed to be that clean. So I stepped back. I forced myself to question it again. Maybe this is just pattern seeking. Our brains trying to connect dots that aren't really connected. That's what skeptics say. And they're not wrong. We do that. We look for meaning, even when there isn't any. And I wanted that to be true. I really did. Because the alternative means we're living in something far less stable than we think. But then I remembered the soldier. 15 minutes. 5 days. That's not a pattern. That's a problem. And problems like that don't just go away. They wait until we notice them, or until they happen again. And that's when I realized something I can't unsee. If time storms are real, then they're not just anomalies. They're warnings, small cracks, in something much bigger, something we haven't fully seen yet. And if that's true, then the real question isn't what are they, it's what happens when the storm doesn't pass? I couldn't stop thinking about that question. What happens when the storm doesn't pass? Because every case I found had one thing in common. People came back. The soldier returned. The pilot landed. The witnesses survived. But what about the ones who didn't? Yeah, nobody talks about that. No reports. No stories. Just disappearances. And suddenly, all those missing person cases don't feel so random anymore. People vanish every year. No trace. No explanation. Gone. What if some of them didn't get lost? What if they stepped into something and never found their way back? That thought sat with me, heavy, because it means these time storms aren't just strange. They're dangerous, unpredictable, and completely invisible until it's too late. But then something else hit me, something worse. What if some people do come back, but we don't notice? Think about it. If someone returns from a different time, slightly off, slightly changed, will we even know? Or will we just call it stress, fatigue, trauma, brush it off, and move on? That's when reality started to feel unstable, like everything around me was solid until it wasn't. Because if time can shift, even a little, then how do you know you're where you're supposed to be? How do you know this moment is the correct one, or just one version of many? And here's the part that really got under my skin. What if time isn't breaking? What if it's correcting itself? Think about that. All these storms, all these distortions, what if they're not accidents? What if they're adjustments? Like reality trying to fix something we don't even realize is wrong. That would mean there's a version of events that's supposed to happen, a timeline that's stable, and everything else gets pulled, pushed, rewritten. And if you're in the wrong place at the wrong moment, you feel it, you see it, you become part of it. For a second, I actually laughed, because that idea, that's terrifying, but also kind of absurd. Reality correcting itself? Come on. But the more I thought about it, the harder it was to dismiss, because we already know the universe has rules, balance, symmetry, cause and effect. So what if time has its own way of maintaining that balance, and we're just unaware of it? And then the final thought hit me, the one I couldn't shake. What if every deja vu you've ever had, every moment that felt off, every time you thought, this has happened before, wasn't your brain glitching? What if it was you brushing against another version of time, another outcome, another reality that almost happened, or did, and somehow you felt it just for a second, and then it was gone, corrected, smoothed over, like it never existed. So now I'm left with this. Either all of this is coincidence, stories, misinterpretations, or we're living inside something far more fragile than we think, something that shifts, adjusts, breaks, and fixes itself. And we're just along for the ride. So let me ask you something. If you walked into that mist and came out 5 days later, would you even want to go back? Or would you stay and find out where time really leads? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories that make you question reality itself, hit subscribe, because next time we might not come back.